Ooh, sorry, just playing around. I can zoom in. Look, can't see it well, but I have a remote control that goes with the new web camera. So hello, hello, hello. It's 20 past 8 at night, and I've decided it's taken me until now to get to try this new webcam. First, I had to get batteries for the remote control, then other things cropped up, and then I decided it was time because I couldn't let a day go without setting this up and having a go. I'm already so much happier with this webcam. The remote control is fab. I've put a light to the right, but I need it up a bit higher, so I've got to find something to put it on. Oh, tell you what, I'll get there. I will get there. But for now, just bear with me as I make use of this. I'm using the same microphone I did yesterday, which is one that clips to my lapel or to my top. I'm hoping that gives a really good sound. So it'd be lovely if you can give me some feedback on that. Whether it's in the live stream or whether it's when you view it as a not live stream. And I will post the link to it because live streams don't appear in the same place videos do. You have to look in the live section of my YouTube channel page thing, whatever. So I hope you're doing okay and fine and well. It's been a nice day here in South Wales, sunny from time to time, but at the moment there are clouds, but there's some late evening sunshine coming through, and it's nearly in the northern hemisphere here, the summer solstice, autumn solstice, winter solstice for those of you south of the equator, and there's a tinge of excitement in the air. Perhaps that's just my perception because I always look forward to these astronomical kinds of markers in the year. Um, Calendar spring doesn't do it for me. Astronomical spring, summer, autumn, winter. Yeah, that does. So this is one sketchbook I've been working in recently. You saw a little bit of one at the end of my last live stream where I showed you some of my um, sprites, which are kind of creepy cute. And I did ink them in today, and I much prefer inking in the lines rather than having them just as pencil lines. So I'm staying true to my style there. And actually, let me spelunk a moment. Up here, another light. Du-du-du. And don't know if that'll help at all. If I turn it around, excuse me if I knock anything or cause issues and problems, then that, oh gosh, that really does help, doesn't it? Yeah, and I've got the autofocus. Oh no, the autofocus is fine. There we are. Yes, it's got autofocus lock. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And zoom. And fiddly things on there like saturation and brightness and I can turn the microphone off, the camera off, whatever. I'm quite happy. So there we are. If only this was one here we are. I'm wittering because I'm excited, or I actually was looking at this camera and the other one, and I decided on the other one because it was a bigger name, and I've already got some bits and pieces from that company, Logitech, which I really like. I've got a Bluetooth keyboard to use with my laptop because I have my laptop on a stand that lifts it up so the screen is higher, and yeah, it's easier for me to look at. I'm not looking down at it all the time. And it's awkward to type it then. And it's a lovely sort of like rosy pink, metallic rosy pinky gold colour, which I love. So it's very cute as well. And so I thought that might be the better option. Duh, duh. Didn't read it, did I? But this one seems to be working really nicely. So less of the blurb. Let's have a look at some of my pages here. And this is the first page. I may have shown you this one before, or partly shown you. This is it completed, where I used black fine liners. It could have been any one of a number of brands to draw the design. I've added colour to this. The background was coloured with distress inks, which you can see around the edge. There's blues and greens and browns and so on. So I drew the design in pen, the basic outlines, and then the areas I filled in instead of using like solid colour or coloured pencils, ink tints, or watercolours. I actually used patterns from using fine liners. I think they were Staedtler Triplus fine liners. Mostly there might have been a couple from, I don't know, Arteza or some other sets I've got, Stabilo or whatever. I honestly don't know. I can't remember because this was back in, I don't know. I haven't got the month on here. But and then what I did was to add shading. I went back with chalk pastels and I was really pleased with that. I'm still not sure about these areas and these in particular because they don't really stand out because it's the same colour. But um, part of me, once I'd started adding this, I had to keep going. Part of me loves it. Part of me thinks might have been better left plain, like I've done in my recent work. It's all a process of learning. Okay, look at this. I can show you this sketchbook in its entirety. This is upside down because if I try and draw this way, with it that way up, this gets in the way. So let's turn it round. You can see it. There we go. And again, distress ink background. I've just drawn on this. I got so far and I thought, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what I want to do, but the chances are I'll come back and work on this and use watercolours to add colour to places like I've been doing. But there's no rush for me to do that. It is Sketchbook. And as it's mixed media paper, I watched a video on YouTube, where else, where somebody was working with collage to create art. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll have a go at that. I'll make some coloured papers using distress inks and some, whatever else I've available for colour. And I ended up creating these. I've added watercolour and Inktense pencils and ChromaFlow pencils to add colour to help to bring the different sections out. Certainly in these two, I haven't done much here. I've added metallics. You can see them catching the light. Hey, in all. Let me just move that one down so you can catch the light. Yes, there you go. And I've started adding, different things in to see what happens. Um, I think the thing I would do, perhaps more than anything, is to use these not as artworks in their own, but perhaps as shapes and patterns that I can then redraw in a different way, pen and ink, and then use that as the basic structure for a drawing. But I do have to say I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm really useless at cutting. I think I went over the top with black ink here. I'm not sure. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's here as a reminder. This one, it's upside down again. Distress ink background, but I added watercolor. I put some rusty lines in, let the water drip and flow where it would, or the ink, the watercolor. And then I just came back and used different sections, what I could see there, to add different patterns, to which I added more watercolor and just add watercolor or pencils. Not sure which. Do you know that? Can't remember. I think it was watercolor. Might have been ink tense. Might have been ChromaFlow. I don't know, but it was fun. It was some fun and something very different to do. Will I do something like this again? It's probably not, but I do like some elements in here. I like the flowy bits here, and I like the way that the colours go through the different sections and little things peek out and so on. It was fun to do. This looks like a contour map, an ordnance survey map, we call them here in the UK, for land, you know. Where the lines are close together, you've got a very steep slope. Where they're flat, it's like a plateau or a flat valley bottom. Um, these could be hills or they could be big holes, whichever you prefer. But that was fun to do, and just using lots of different patterns, trying different things out. And I'm done with that as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to leave some of the background in it. I wanted to have the colour showing through as well. So I didn't want to go overboard with too much. This is another collage. These are two more collages. This one, um, I put there were distress ink down there. You can see, well, you can't really see the colour because we're a bit bleached out here. That's how it looks to me. But there's these circles. Oh, I can't remember. Did I collage? Yeah, I collaged on here with paper that had been coloured with distress inks. And then I used um, Inktense pencils, I think, to add more colour. And there are places where you can see, oh, it does say here, distress ink background, collage paper, Inktense pencils, then some gesso, white gesso, to knock the colours back a bit, Payne's grey to add shadows, and then watercolours and doodling and other things to add the white and a white acrylic pen and black fine liners to add the texture. It looks like bubbles, they look like or planets or something bizarre, but it was quite interesting to do because I wouldn't normally work that way. The paper, I don't know if you can how well you can see the let's have a look and see. Just let it focus. There we go. You might be able to make out some words in some of these or some letters. Doesn't look like ordinary English. That's because it's a book in Gaelic, which is there we go. Autofocus off, which is Irish, you know, sort of like the Irish language. And it's a very old, it's an old book, um, not worth anything. My older sister gifted it to me. She'd had it for years. She'd picked it up in a charity shop for next to nothing. I think it's a history of some of the kings of old Ireland. I don't really know, but the font, the writing, the style of writing or the style of text in there is just so lovely, and it needs to be used in some way. So I thought, I think I've used a page of it, so I haven't really wasted it. It's not a very big book, and there's more of that writing in here. You can see. I will zoom you in again because I can. Oops. There we go. And you can see, if I let it focus, you can see the way that the font, the text, the print is really interesting in the shapes of letters. So I was really quite happy with that. Again, I put strips of the paper on, and then in between, with sections, I've just drawn patterns on that I like. There's one over the text, but then I decided I didn't want to hide the text. And I think I've used, um, I'm not sure, I don't know if I used watercolors. I think I used colored pencils here, the Chromaflow pencils. I think, but I'm not sure because I didn't make a note of it. I thought this one was a bit clumsy when I was looking at it after doing it, but now I look at it, I think, oh, it's quite interesting. Something to think about and perhaps do later. This one I was working on. Hello, Miss Betsy. I'm doing fine. Trying out another camera. I sent the other one back and bought a different one. Don't worry, got a full refund for it. I'm just looking at my sketchbook at the moment and showing you this and talking through it. Mainly so I can have feedback on how the image looks. I know I've got to do something about the lighting. The lamp I've got on to my right, I need to lift higher up, but it's okay. I've got another lamp on the other side as well, but it'll be fine. I'll work it out eventually. This is practical things. I'm not very practical. It takes me a while. So if I carry on here, this one, I finished this a while ago at the end of May, but I started adding colour in places with the Chromaflow pencils. But today I added watercolour and I love the intensity I can get with watercolour, surprisingly. And sort of like a rusty or reddish corrosion looking colour and this all blue and indigo there. And it really does lift different parts out. I'm not sure if I'm going to put more watercolour anywhere here. I don't know yet because it's a work in progress. This one is done. This one I used, You can see the colours of the Distress ink background here. And once I'd finished drawing, instead of using watercolor or coloured pencils or anything else, I actually used the same Distress ink colours that I'd used for the background to paint sections in to add more colour, but then everything looked flat. So what I did was I gave it a spray of water again to cause these water spots in it, paint to run and do what it will. And I'm so much happier with that. There's a lot of texture there. I really like that. So I'm not going to do anything to it. These two, I haven't done anything to this other than draw the basic structure of a design. Don't know what I'm going to do with it. This one though, I started adding colour with um, some coloured pencils. Which ones are they? Um, they're not ChromaFlow. They're a different set, whose name I can't remember. But I quite like how they're looking, and I think even though the colours aren't identical to, well, they're similar to some of the pinks and peachy pinks in the background, I think it'll work out nicely. And I've got some of these kinds of heads creeping in here, Aztec-y or South American. Oh, I've added some graphite shading in this one. I think I was doing that to see how it would look, and maybe complete it all with graphite shading, and then perhaps use Distress inks as watercolors or watercolors to add some extra color to it. That's a page where I just put 6 squares on to try different things out. These were motifs or patterns and shapes that appeared in this drawing here and here. So this one is a work in progress as well. I've started adding patterns, but I think from what I showed in yesterday's live video. Thank you very much. Thanks for the feedback. I'm glad the quality is excellent. My other camera I know was getting old. It wasn't not beginning to break down or anything. It just didn't have the resolution that this one has. I've got to work out what resolution this is running at and frame speed, but as long as it's really good, then that's brilliant. And I'm glad you like these drawings. But I think from the live feed yesterday, was it with this one? No, it wasn't that one. What was I working on yesterday? Oh, this one. That I really like the idea of just keeping to a small number of textural patterns to help to bring dimension into it. So I did start adding patterns and did a bit more today. And I know somebody, I can't remember who it was, asked how I created these patterns in watercolor. So I'm going to show you today later on. So that one's a work in progress. I'm in no rush. It's a sketchbook and I may never do it. Haven't done anything on that page yet. It's all browns and greens. It's very grungy looking and I like it. This one, instead of using just plain distress inks, this has got distress oxides, which are more opaque and they give a kind of velvety texture to the paper. But they give a quite a moody feel to this, and I really haven't worked out exactly what I'm going to do. I've started adding pattern or texture in places, but I really don't know where that's going to go. I don't like distress oxides for this, I think. Possibly I may do. It depends how I apply them. Then this one, which I'll turn this way round. Again, distress oxides, and I've started adding texture here. But everything, it's the colours, like on the previous page, there's not a lot of difference in terms of intensity of colour, saturation. And I need that contrast between light and dark to help to bring things out. So even though I was putting dark in here, it just feels that it just makes everything less distinguishable. Whereas when I leave it as it is, you can see things more. It's learning. Oh, there we go. Yeah, me trying. Creepy cutes. Sort of like weird thing. I don't know, troll or something, a sprite. All creepy cute. Um, drew something there with pencil and then filled it in with watercolor and some highlights in colored pencil just to try it. and little drawings up here for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure. So that's where I was yesterday. So with no further ado, excuse the noise, out comes a piece of paper, which goes there. Question is, have I got a ruler nearby? Not that I can, have I? Yes, of course I have. It's over there. I can be a bit of a witwat at times. Okay, I've got my that there. I've got my glasses. There we go. And down here, I do like to draw borders in, as I've said before, and I particularly like these days. Oh, was that? That's not bad. I'll just try it again. This, the edge that's got the holes in is giving me some difficulties getting this leveled up, but I will make it happen. There we go. In some way or another. Come on. Should have cut it off because it's going to annoy me. Right, so I can pop that out of the way, that out the way. Let's move that. Let's get my O5 and let's do the framing. And I think today I may work on this in a landscape format instead of portraits, just to see how it works. I'm just going to take some of this pencil off. So I've made quite dark lines and some of it I'll just want to just knock back a bit so I've got enough that I can see where I'm going, but not so much that I'll lose where these lines are. Even though I've torn this out, if I leave this on, I can always slot it back into my sketchbook because these will go back on those on the spiral binding quite happily. So I won't lose it as long as I remember to do that. That's the big thing for me, is remembering to do things like that. Yeah, I'm not worried if my lines are all a bit wobbly and wonky, because if I deliberately make them a bit wobbly and wonky, then nobody will know which is deliberate and which isn't. They'll just think it's all deliberate. It also adds that little human touch, I think. And I'm quite big on that human touch, I think, in art. I think it's important. So I'm going to go and create a double frame. I'm doing this by eye, I'm not measuring it. And I'm doing it with my pen directly. And if it's all a bit wonky or not even, again, I'm not going to worry about it. Because I can always disguise that fact later on with by using a pattern to fill this area in places. So if it looks like these lines go close together, I could always put sort of some lines in that look like they are pulling it together. And in other places, I can find a way of holding it apart, perhaps putting some little balls or beads in. But I think this will be fine, regardless. There we go. Look at that. Oops, that one's a bit bigger. So, oh, I can make use of some of these ideas. I tell you what, I'm just going to pop in here a third frame, as it were, within the frame, just to give me a very small space between my drawing and the start of the outer frame. So any patterns I put in this outer frame don't sort of like bump up against things that are in the actual design and drawing. It's just that little gap, that little space that will make things all rather nice. Sorry for my hands getting in the way. This isn't exactly exciting, but it's fun. Doing things like this is a nice way to get your hand-eye coordination starting to work. And just do it on blank paper before you start drawing anything. I have done some drawing today. It's been a funny old day, but it's good. I'm so tired because I didn't get enough sleep last night, but that's okay. So keep this at the top, but as you know, sometimes in my art there is no up and down. So I am going to start somewhere. I think I'm going to start somewhere over here. And I think what I'm going to start with, and perhaps I can zoom in for you, as soon as I can zoom in, and again, and perhaps again. There we are, autofocus lock on. So I'm not zooming in and out as I move my hands. That was the most frustrating thing about the other camera, this wobbly in and out. So I think I'm going to start with a kind of very wobbly, very stone-like, almost triangular shape. It's got some nibbles out of it and things like that, but I quite like that. Just going to add an inside space. And I think I'm going to add something to the outside. And then I'm just going to go and add some line thickness here and there. I'm actually adding that line thickness or adding thickness to the line in the same kinds of areas on each one. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, but I am going to have a hole in the middle though. Quite a deep hole at that, I think. This is an 05 fine liner. And this will be my initial focal point. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but I shall see what happens, because all's well and fine. Okay, I think the outer one might just need to be darker all the way around just to help delineate it, separate it from anything else I kind of draw here. I'm not going to draw the whole design in this video because I do want to show how that watercolor texture that somebody asked me about is made, but I do want to get enough here that we can see the design growing. Okay, I've got a dip here which to me always feels like I can have something growing out of it, and for some reason I've now got a tentacle growing. Well, that's kind of what it looks like, but I'm going to have a tentacle going underneath it as well. So I'm imagining drawing behind and then perhaps up a little bit, and then so I've got two there. This section, I am going to fill it in with black. It's a very tiny section, and I think that will just help with the separations here. Now, something will happen there, and perhaps I can just do one that perhaps goes this way. Because why not? And it makes me happy because I've now got 3 tentacles, and they're touching the outer edge, so they're creating, starting to separate space now. Didn't expect tentacles to appear, but they did, so I'm all fine with that. I like a good tentacle in my drawings. No sticky pads on it, whatever you call them, suckers. There we go, sticky pads. Not on these. They may end up with stripes, mind you, because I do like a good stripy tentacle. But that can wait for another time. Today, it's all about getting the outside borders and edge, the main sort of like structure of this down. I think here, create something that's got layers here. Just felt that a nice sort of like circular shape could fit in there nicely. Almost like, I don't know, it's got some structure to it again. 3 layers. Yeah, well, 2 layers and a hole in the middle. Quite like that. And perhaps I can get another kind of weird shape kind of going behind these tentacles because, well, why not? I am trying to add a little bit of ink on the end of each line just to thicken it or put a little triangle on the end, just to suggest that these are all glued together, as it were. And a little bit in these little corners where things meet as well, just to tidy it all up. Okay, no tentacles here, just an upside down arch, maybe a couple more. Do like rounded arches. Don't mind the pointy Gothic ones, but round arches I find nicer for whatever reason. Why do we like something? I don't know. How do you tell somebody, why you like something? It just pleases my senses. What else can I say? I like the way my hand feels as I draw these curves. And it's a nice kind of shape to draw, as far as I'm concerned. I've said this before and I'll say it millions of times again, but a lot of shapes and lines appear in my art simply because the way my hand moves makes me feel, or it gives me some pleasure in drawing, which is always, always a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So there's another kind of line I like to draw. Now that makes an interesting, slicing this area into 2. So I'm going to stick with this shape. Just one of them, otherwise these areas will become too small to do a lot with watercolor in. But I am going to add extra ink to the left and the lines at the left and the bottom. That's all I'm going to say. And not forgetting the little glue or solder that joins all of this together, like things of stained glass. So these are really interesting. I've got a really interesting set of shapes here. I wish this one, well, it will join in because I've made it join in and join with the others there. That one, an odd shape at the end, so I'll just fill the end with black and just let it trail away there. That looks better. So already that's looking quite interesting. Okay, so what next? Yeah, I love my columns. I can't help it. So I just feel I need a column or something here just to hold these arches up in a way. Can't have them floating in midair without any support underneath them. Would squash what's ever underneath. Oh, this looks almost like a helmet of some kind. Am I going to draw a face? Don't know. It's probably not, knowing me. Or maybe. You just see how it takes me as it goes. As I go with the lines that appear. Again, I had no idea I was going to draw that shape. I just let it happen because it's fun. Okay, I think we've got a nose appearing because, well, we kind of decided I wanted a nose. It looks like the nostrils on the side. It's not meant to. So we've got kind of almost a curl on the side of our noses. And here, I want an eye under here. And I am going to draw it in a very stylized way. It's not, a real eye or a human looking eye. It's just an eye. Perhaps here is where the pupil will be. It's a little bit lower actually. And I will put a dot there, and I'm going to fill this in with black while I'm at it. If something happens to that circle there, I perhaps misget it, don't add sort of like watercolor carefully if I do in this area, or graphite gets in there, I can always clean it up, either if it's graphite and eraser, if it's paint or ink. I can always use a white pen to add that back in. So I'm not worried, but I think I'm going to take this off the nose and I'm going to create a spiral to fill in this space a little bit. Because why not? Now, the next bit is interesting because I've now got to work out about the top lip and things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it from that part. I'm just going to use my pencil to sketch in this. The edge of the teeth in. This here. And then I'm going to roughly draw my teeth in, making sure that these will kind of meet up. So doing everything backwards like so. And then that means I would like to put this edge around the outside, which is kind of like I've gone a little bit, perhaps a little bit too far here. Perhaps I should have put the the mouth in first, but that'll work nicely. There we are. So just put this in. So I'm going to try and get my pen to work, like so. I'm going to come down, 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 drawing the sort of vague gums in, the outline here, then round the bottom, up the side, and then round there again. I am going to add some line weight underneath, definitely underneath here. Should join these together because everything else will be joined in these places by little bits of ink. And if they're not even, well, you know, teeth. Call them British teeth if you're from America. You do insult our dentistry an awful lot. And I mean that in a jokey kind of way. And here, just add a bit there. They're not the best teeth I've ever drawn, but they'll do. They're all a bit wonky teeth. There we go. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more of the column here. This is a weird kind of chin, but I'm happy with that because it is artistic. It's not photorealistic. It's a bit imaginative, or a lot imaginative, you could say. I'm trying to tidy this up with a quite a broad nib now. This one's been much used and abused, so the nib is a lot thicker than an 05 would be. But I'm going to go back and use it just to darken that line, and I'll come in and tidy these up. So, a bit too much black, but we'll work that one out. This is interesting here, and I'm not quite sure what I want to do. That would look a lot better, I think, if I finish this off. That's better. That looks better now. That'll tidy up again afterwards, so that's all right. Perhaps I can just add another border around the mouth. And then these sections I can fill with pattern or something else now. I'll be okay. There we are. So we now have a face. Yeah, it's I think a lot of these faces I think are inspired by my love of Mesoamerican art, so Aztecs, Incas, Mayas, Toltecs, I guess, as well, and whatever. And I just think it's in my head, and it just comes out at times when I need to. The other day it seemed to be birds were the flavour of the days, but today it seems to be this, and it's weathered awkwardly. It's an old one, let's be honest. This needs something in it, but I'm going to leave it as it is so that we have something to add and something to work with. But what I will do here is to add a kind of spiral here as a front. on this kind of helmet, if that's what it is. There we go. It's beginning to look not too bad, not too shabby. What I do want here, though, is I do like to add something to these faces or close to them. That's an area where I can just put colour, so the faces feature and don't get lost in um, a multitude of texture and pattern, which is what can happen when I'm let loose with things to fill in. It's really hard for me to leave open space, but I'm learning. And adding colour to those open spaces really does make my little creative heart happy. So, don't know what I'm doing here, but we'll see what happens. Lines off here. Oh, right, you're going to go like that, are you? So that's an interesting idea here. Ooh, now that's interesting. It is. That is interesting. Not quite sure what it is. It's almost like they're looking towards that. I wonder if I could get that even more so. Yeah, I think if I fill all this in with black, I can always put the pupil in then where I want it. Perhaps that is some kind of telescope or something else that you could be looking through. Don't know. It's interesting either way. Am I going to do something here? I don't know. I want to do something to join these together. And I just think that something like that, and perhaps something like that could work nicely just to hold them together and suggest there's something inside. And I'm just going to add inkiness to the left and bottom. I'm doing that one on the underneath there. Just a little bit there. And just leave that as it is, because I really don't know what I'm trying to create there. It's interesting. Don't know what's going to go in those, she says. I kind of do, I think. So just splitting these spaces up in an interesting way. I don't know if I'm trying to make something look like it's mechanical. I've got something here that looks like it's got layers to it, which will be interesting. So again, just get that darker area here. And then that'll suggest when I come in to add colour that I want this to be darker. So see how that works and goes. It's interesting. It's almost I now want to put something here and definitely here. There's lots of sirens going off in my town tonight. I can never tell whether it's police or ambulance. I can usually tell fire engines because they have a different siren when they go off. And quite a few going off then. So goodness knows what's going on, what's occurring. Okay, so that's interesting. This doesn't join up with that at all, so it doesn't look like this is part of this structure. It looks like this is going behind it, which is nice. Nice, nice, nice. Okay. I think that's as much as I'm going to do for now on this. So let me just zoom out. There we go. You can see how much space I've got left here. I say that, but as I look at it, I think I might need just a little bit more on here, perhaps. I do kind of want to not have this connected to anything, so I think there's going to be another kind of semicircular thing going on here, but I think it's going to be a little bit different because I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom. But I am adding some detail here. That will make it look like perhaps it can move, maybe, or it's something a little bit different holding things together. I could make this quite dimensional if I wanted to by drawing almost like block letters, but using the shapes. But I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it quite flat, and I'm going to let the dimension come in from thickness, just the thickness of the lines, suggesting where these are nice and where there's some volume to them. Then I think I'm going to take this off here and bring this down that away. I think that will work quite nicely. So again, I've got this big area here. And if I work here, I can perhaps complete that circle as well. This does feel kind of steampunky. There's something about it that says mechanical almost, but not quite, which would be a good thing to have some contrast going on now somewhere. So that's an interesting kind of thing going on here. This may not be perfectly centre or perfectly the same shape as what I've just drawn, but I'm happy with it, however it works out, to be honest. There we go. I'm getting clumsy with my lines now. That's interesting. And I know what kind of pattern I can put in there, what I want to do, so that's fine. As long as I remember what I'm doing, all's good. That's okay. All right then. This is the only thing, this and this really are the only things that look pretty organic, apart from the head, if you can count that as organic. And I'd rather like to bring that kind of contrast in. And I think I'm just going to do something quite simple. And I'm going to use kind of teardrop shapes with centers. Now I know this is either identical to or similar to one of the patterns that are used in Zentangle, but I can't remember what its name is. It's been a long time since I've looked at such things, I have to say. My head's been in the creepy acute and abstract. But I just think this will be a nice way to add something that isn't so mechanical or so oh, non-organic in nature, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. To add something that feels a little bit different. I'm just filling these in as I feel they need to be filled in. There's no need to make it perfect. There's no need to try and fill all the spaces between them up, though where I've made a little overlap like that, I will. And in these little spaces, I am going to go and add some black. I find like I can give myself permission to do this because I've already filled things in with black over here. And so it'd be nice to carry that on into this. That could almost be almost black there as well. So this one needs that there. How's that looking? I want it a bit bigger and bushier, I think. It feels a little small here for me at the moment. Though there will be some small little bushy bits. Because why not? Vary the size, make it interesting. Some going on there. There's a bit there that needs just filling in. That in the middle. And these kinds of teardrop shapes are some of my favourite things to draw. And my hand enjoys drawing them. Sounds a strange thing to say, doesn't it? But it's just that feeling of the way that my hand moves, the line that's forming. There's a sensory pleasure to it. And for me, that's as good a reason as any to draw things the way I do, I suppose. You've got to have joy in what you do. Maybe not big gring joy, but that sense of contentment of being in the flow in the moments, of just enjoying the process. And sometimes not being invested, or a lot of the time not being invested in what you think the outcome will be, just going with it. Just waiting to see what appears or what will make a good choice next. Sometimes you'll make a good choice, sometimes you think you may not. And that's when work needs to be set aside for a while. So you can come back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh mind and carry on with something else in the meantime. And it may be that after a break you don't like what you've done. And what have you done? You've invested a bit of time, some materials, but hopefully, even though you may not be entirely satisfied with what you've created, which will change when you come back and look at it after you've given yourself a break from it, it always does for me. But then I don't like that little one there, it's going. There we are, power of black. But it's surprising how that little break gives you a chance to appreciate your drawing with the benefit of a break, to go and do something else, to look at something else, to create something else. And just remember to be kind to yourself. But I think sometimes, I say sometimes a lot, and I don't mean sometimes really, but I always get enjoyment out of drawing, out of creating, even if I'm not happy with what ends up on my page, my paper. I know I can learn from it, and for me, that's as important as anything, because that's how we grow and develop, not just as artists, but in life with so many things. It's giving yourself permission to make mistakes. And when we're learning, and we're all always learning, nobody is a complete expert in things. No one. There's always things to learn and consider. There's always new information or new experiences come along. And it's okay to change. And it's okay. Oh, look, I've coloured that one in black in the middle. Guess what I'm gonna have to do to all the others now? I didn't intend to do that. See? I made a mistake, and it's fine because I'll just go and add that ink to all of these. But we learn and we grow, we develop, and out of what you think are mistakes or things you don't like can often come ideas to try new things. Me and my wobbly lines, I'd always try to draw the perfect smooth lines. And of course, that's so easy in digital art. But I've noticed that with digital art, when I'm drawing digitally, I lose that humanness. It's either too much or it's too smooth. There doesn't seem to be anywhere in between for me, which is why I like drawing on paper so much. I embrace that imperfection, that things aren't always perhaps the best I could draw in terms of smooth and straight or curved, to have that perfect curve, that perfect line. If I wanted that, I could get drawing tools out, such as templates or rulers or compasses or other tools to help me do that. But that's not what it's about. I wouldn't get the same pleasure if I used, say, one of these bendable curvy rulers to draw the curves in this drawing as I do allowing my hand to go in the direction it just wants to go in. I want to draw a curve. I'll see what happens. If I want to, what do they call it in Zentangle, aura that curve, well, if I don't do it perfectly, I, as long as I enjoy the process of drawing it, that's fine. That imperfection is a function of me and how my hand works for me, how I do things. And I'll embrace that quite happily. This is beginning to remind me, with all this black and white, of posters from, I think, the 1960s. Posters for concerts and things I've seen. I think I'm gonna have to look that up again. As although I'm 60 myself, I do remember the 60s and things like that. So it was all around me as I was a very young child and aware of these things because my other light's gone off. Great, there you are. Go back on. Must have accidentally touched the timer on it for an hour. Oh yeah, must have done. So my older sister's 10 years older than me. And so she was a teenager when I was aware of all sorts of things going on. She liked the Beatles and all other kinds of music of that era. And so I'd get to see all of these things and the art that she drew. And that's always been an influence on me because I was fascinated with it. Which is always interesting. So there we go. So that's all of that there, which adds a complete contrast, not just in the organic nature of it, but in how much black there is in that. Oh, hello, Stephanie. Thank you. That's most probably because it's my hand gets in the way. Yeah, I will work this out, the light. Oh gosh, I've now just dimmed that. Goes bright, and then I think the camera auto adjusts for the brightness. So I'm afraid you'll have to put up with it for now. Hello, Tracy. Lovely to see you here. So this is a nice contrast with all the black into this. it looks like I've got to draw things together. It's almost like I want to tuck some of this away somewhere over here or in this part, just to show that it sort of like belongs together. But it's just a question of um, getting all of this kind of sorted out and done. And I don't know what I said then, and I don't know if it made sense because I was busy focusing on this. Okay, there we go, another curve coming down here. And I think I know what I'm going to do. It just came to me as I joined that here. I want some of these almost climbing up this fine arching line here, almost like they've got some support to grow upwards. And perhaps that's how I can tie all of this together as one. Maybe. We'll see. Chunky, chunky, chunky. Chunky pen here. Pressing on the nib quite hard and it's getting flatter as time goes on. But it'll be fine, she says. It will be fine. Oh, there's a thin and weedy one there. Another one there, but I think that just kind of fits that off. I almost need a couple more here just to add a bit of bushy support to these. And that will do me for now, I think, although perhaps just one here away from the curve. Because then it really does look like it's reaching upwards, and perhaps that one there will help. There's an awful lot of black in this section. I keep saying that because it's true. But the contrast is, I was going to say delightful, but at the same time, it's kind of, oh, that looks so different. What's going on here? He still needs something out here. Thought I'd done, but obviously not. And that's nice. And then perhaps that or something like that here just to finish this off. Oh, that's nice. That looks like a little sprig growing out, and then we can do the same here. Spriggy sprigs. Bushy spriggy sprigs, perhaps. There we go. Full of new growth. That'll do. And then there's one there. That's okay. So that looks not too bad at all. Okay. I do like to repeat things in places, so I've got still not growth spriggy enough. I don't even know if that's a phrase or terminology, and at the moment it works for me. There we go, that'll do. That's fine. Leave I was gonna say leave it alone, Angela, but I'm not. Of course, that feels better, yeah. Okay. This kind of shape, I would like perhaps that's an awkward shape there, awkward space. This kind of shape, I think I would like kind of growing out of here, or that kind of idea of a shape that is perhaps not organic, but has these rough edges or these uneven edges peeking out of here. Just to have something there that is in contrast, that adds some open space around this. And perhaps I can have another one here as well. That one's a bit different. I've got the shadow, or the darker line suggesting shadow and depth dimension in the opposite direction, but that's fine. I can sort that one out with what am I trying to say? Not entirely sure. With color shading and things like that, yes, we can do that. And I've got two there, so we do need a third one, and I think the perfect place for that is going down here, like so, which will be just fine. As I just go over that line a little bit, like so. And that works quite nicely, I think. I think. And I think from the bottom one here, let's have some tentacles. Because why not? It's tentacular. Not spectacular, just tentacular. So I'm just going to keep three of them going here. Have the darkness at the bottom. This is from a woman who said she wasn't going to complete this. I think it's going to happen, as in complete the areas, but I will do some watercolouring because I just want to get the definition of areas done and decide where I want to add colour as that dark background or that background colour to help to lift this or to separate the design from the white. Okay. I'm not sure what I want to do up here. I've got no idea what that is or why that appeared, but it has. So we'll go with it. It's obviously something precious being held in place by these organic, I don't know, clamps or connectors. Sort of reminds me a little bit, not exactly, but the idea seems to be like neurons. and how nerves connect to neurons and so on, or the receptors in cells or in the brain, as if, the information is going to be passed from one side to the other through this in the middle. It feels that way. Of course, I could be completely wrong, but, it's got that feeling of passing information on. This one's going to be doing something similar, I think. I actually quite like these. These I have drawn things like this before. This isn't new, and I'm sure it's not new to to a lot of people, but using it in this way seems to be something new, perhaps, and a bit different. I am going to draw underneath here, and I am going to cheat a little and make this one a bit fatter, that, a fatter hat that sits on it, or cat, or connector, so that, we're not having it disconnected from everything, but the connection is there. And perhaps I can do another one of these. Oh, now I'm getting creative. As I'm working with this, I can see how I can create other ways of connecting these together, or creating this kind of network, I suppose. And that was quite fun to draw. And I think I could have, let's have one here. It's just a small one. It joins like that at an angle instead. I quite like that. So that's working quite nicely. And perhaps one somewhere here. Says they have to be perfectly round. This one certainly isn't. But it's still going to get its hat and connect this way. Who would have thought I'd create something like this? Certainly not me. What fun! And uh, so now I've connected this to other parts, which are they're all connected. You can follow things all together. There's nothing not connected to something that's connected to something. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking. Oh, I'm blathering like an idiot at the moment. I like this. So if it's about being brave and going, what if? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're not happy with what you created, to begin with, but then you have an idea to work with. And if the worst comes to the worst, such thing as colouring areas in black. And when you colour areas in black, then that is when everything, everything can become wonderful. Too, I've made a lot of a mess here. I'm just looking here to see if there's anywhere here now I want to add anything else. I'm not entirely sure I do, because I just think that I want to start adding some colour. So let me put my pen aside. I do have this here. Just put my pens to one side. Excuse my arm. I tell you what I do want to do before I add watercolor. We have pencil and tortillon, because I think adding the pencil before the watercolor is a very good idea. That'll do for now. Right, I've got water. Ooh, bang crash wallop, almost. I've got water. It looks disgusting, but it's not really, honestly. It really isn't. Okay, I'm looking for a particular brush, my favorite brush. Where is it? There it is. That's one of them. I think it's a crow quill brush. This one is synthetic sable hair, and it's blooming lovely. Yeah, it's synthetic. I do synthetics. This is a size 6. Again, it's synthetic sable. No, it's not. That's a Rembrandt one, which is pure sable. It came in a set of Rembrandt um, brushes I bought. I've got 2. This one is synthetic sable as well. It's a round 2. You can see that one. But I wanted a bigger one than that. 3 won't do it. 1 won't do it. It's even smaller. Right, well, let's see what happens. We'll use that one. Does come to a point as I work with it. Just looking for one that's a little bit bigger that I like using. Ho hum. These will do. There we are. Where's my watercolors? They're over there. But first, the graphites. Okay, let me choose a couple of areas where I want to add color. I want to add color here. And I'm sorry I can't remember your name, but somebody did leave a message asking me to show how I get the textures in the watercolor that you've seen in my artwork that I've done recently. So I'm using a 4B graphite pencil. 4B is quite soft, and also it's much darker than an HB. So you don't need to work hard to put a lot of graphite down or to get a darkish color. But the downside of it is because it's a soft pencil, this graphite will spread quite a long way, a long distance. So it's about keeping everything. Oh, hi Trevor, lovely to have you here. I'm glad you enjoy the changes across the page. I think if I had a bigger page, then I'd start repeating things in more, or perhaps I will later on. Who knows what will happen? But I'm just adding shading to these areas just to put put some darkness underneath the watercolors I'm going to add. If I find this too dark, I know that I can erase it and to remove some of it where I don't want it. Um, Erasers are magic. That's all I'm saying. They really are. And it's whatever works for you. For me, it works. So I want to make sure I've got quite a light area in the middle. And all I'm doing is just dabbing this down just to pick up some of the graphite and make it less even as well. You know, the bottom of this, I don't know, you can see it is all kinds of lumpy and bumpy, so it's not going to pick everything up evenly. And I can just go back and add in some or spread things out where I need it spreading out, like so. So this already is just starting to bring dimension even in these couple of little places. I need to find a larger space to work in as well. Those who've joined this live stream, what is it? An hour and 24 minutes into it or thereabouts, we missed the beginning. The start of it, I showed, um, the work I've been doing in the sketchbook since May, and bits and pieces that, what's in there, and talked about those. I then started drawing this, and I've done as much as I want to do, I think. I know. I know I do. Um, and now I'm just starting to add shadow. But once the live stream is over, it will be processed and available to view. Not you have to go to the live section of my YouTube page, but what I will do is I will post a link to the live, recorded live, um, in the comments, and most probably around my social media as well, so that if you've missed anything, you want to see it, you can always go back and watch it. So there we go. And of course, I've got a new camera, new microphone. Miss Betsy said that the quality of the image is really good. My lighting is awful. I know this much. Um, but it'll do for now until I've worked out what I need and how to do get that sorted. That's a different story. Um, but the microphone hopefully is giving better sound than what I was using previously. So, okay, let's get on with this. Here, I'm going to have these two sections with watercolor in as well. I'm not going to worry about the other sections until I've added the texture I want to them. And I'm going to try to keep the number of textural patterns I use to a minimum on this particular drawing for so it becomes busy, but not overwhelmingly busy with so many patterns and details that it's awkward to look at. It loses some harmony, in my opinion. You may or may not agree with me, but I'm going to see how that works out for me. Started doing it on another um, drawing I was working on with you in the live stream yesterday. But I've come with this because I did notice a comment. I haven't answered comments left yesterday yet, where somebody wanted to know how I got the effects I did with my watercolors, which is the whole purpose of drawing this, because I've already done the watercolor on that particular drawing. And there are others, I'm not sure whether I want to do watercolor sections or not. This one is drawn to have those watercolor sections. So here I'm just adding some shading, or some graphite where I want the shading. Because this 4B pencil is so soft, I don't have to worry about putting the graphite on neatly, because it will move on the paper. The trick to removing all the lines and the unevenness that you put it on is not to press too hard with the tortillon. It's just to gently move the graphite around rather than pressing it into the paper. If you press hard, it presses it into the paper, and then you can't move it around and get it all nice and smooth. There are areas where I'm adding just what graphite there is on the tip of the tortillon, just to blend these areas out as much as I can. It's never going to be perfect. This is mixed media paper that I'm working on from Ohuhu. It's 7 by 10, not including this bit on the edge, because that's where I tore it out of the sketchbook. But it's still decent. Now here, I'm in two minds whether I think I will do this with the background colour. I don't feel I want to separate this out in any kind of way. Um, or separate the area up with bands or whatever else. I think I just want it more or less as it is, to be honest. So I'm just add some more graphite, and then won't do these, but I've got enough space in these to show you how I create those textures. I'm not even, this is how I do it. I'm not saying I don't know if there are if there is one correct way to use watercolors. I think it's like many media, you find your own way. and it then becomes your way of doing something, it becomes your style, your voice. It's part of how you like to create. Of course, that's my opinion, and not everybody will agree with it perhaps, but I think it's important, as I've said previously not that long ago, to be you. And sometimes we have to find out who we are by trying things out that other people do, but also having the presence of mind to go, well, that was interesting, but it's not really me. And perhaps then having the bravery or the courage to go, well, let's see what happens if. I think that's how I do a lot of my art is let's see what happens if. Colouring books, I have a theme to work with, but it's still a so what what's this? And it's still, no clear idea of what's going to turn out on each page. I just work with it as I need to. There we go. So I've got enough there to work with. I have. Do I want to? I do want to fill all three of those arches in. I'm not going to do anywhere over here because I'm now beginning to feel, "Oh, it's a lot to do." But these areas aren't too big. Now, this paper is not watercolor paper. Oh, you're most welcome, Miss Betsy. I'm glad you've been drawing along. Hello, Sunshine Star Child. Lovely to see you here again as well. And it's lovely to have everybody here who's with me, has been with me throughout there. I'd love to see what you've created from this, Miss Betsy. And don't be afraid to make it yours. It's so important that you decide what you do and how you do it. But a good way to learn is by having something to follow on with. And then it's about things called reiterations where you do the same thing or same kind of thing, but in a slightly different way, or try different things, or choose a section of it that you like and make that bigger. Perhaps I'll explain that another time. I haven't done much of that for a long, long time. So I've got my watercolors here. These are a set called Rosa Gallery. They're from the Ukraine and they come in full pans rather than half pans. They are professional quality. They're not horribly expensive. I can't remember how much I paid for this set, but it wasn't expensive. Um, where did I get them? I think I got them from Cult Pens in the UK. Didn't get them on Amazon, I don't think. Um, and they've got different sets. This is their full range of colours, which is, I don't know, 36, I think. I think it's 36. I'm not going to count them. You can count them if you want. But I've used blues and greens for my backgrounds a lot. So I think it's time to choose a different colour. I want something that's going to be quite dark. And I think I want purple. This here is Payne's Grey, and a little bit of Payne's Grey with a lot of purple isn't going to make a lot of difference to it. But I do want a colour that will darken this down a little bit. And I tend towards indigo more than anything else, as it tones it down and it makes it a more bluey purple. So I'm going to use a wet brush that has the paint on it has got a lot of water, and not a lot of watercolor pigment in it because my first job is to wet the area I want to work on. So I don't want it soaking wet, but I want to add enough water that it won't dry out too quickly because I'm going to want to add more color on top. The reason I use color rather than just clear water is I can see where I've been, and it just makes it easier, and it's going to be the color I use. I've actually gone into the band here just a tiny bit in my haste. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about a perfect gradient here. Now I'm picking up some more color, but this this watercolor has got more color in it and a little less water. You can see it's all beginning to pool and puddle a bit. And get I'm terrible. I watch people and they put their brushes into paint with the colors on they've got, and logically I know that colour isn't going to do anything much at all to the watercolour pan apart from make it look a little bit muckier. It's not going to make much difference to the colour, but all the same time. So here I'm dropping more or less indigo in, and it's really quite a lot of colour in this. But as I get closer to the bottom, rather than putting little dots in, which is what I've done at the top close together, I'm putting them a little bit further apart. Because this is wet still, the ink or the watercolour will blossom out and bloom, which it's beginning to do, but not quite enough for me. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit. I'm going to get some more purple because I do want some more purple there. And while I'm waiting, let's get some more water on my brush and move on to another section. It is a dance. You have to be patient with watercolor. And it's only by practice and doing things that you can learn how it works. I'm in the process of learning how it works for me. And I think my best combination of media at the moment, well, it's definitely pen, black drawing with colour and then with textural patterns with it. So I'm using colour, but I'm also, if I zoom in, try and move this so you can see where it is. Let me just move my brush. Oops, sorry about that. Take my autofocus. There we go. And you'll see what's happening with the colour. You'll also see how badly I'm working here, because I'm trying to keep my hand out the way and not having my head over the top of the work. It's also a useful thing so you can see what's happening, what's occurring, like. Okay. Then I'm going to add some indigo to the top just to bring the blue in. There's no way I'm going to get all these sections exactly the same colour, and that is not my plan. My plan is to create textures that are really nice. So here, whoops, as I splatter water everywhere, I'm just cleaning my brush off, picking up some of the water, which for all intents and purposes is clear, and then I'm just going to touch this into places. And of course, naturally, we can't see it, can we? No, that's no good if I put it there. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. It's how this is just beginning to bloom where I touch the water to it. Where it's dry, or the drier the paint is, the less it's going to spread, although this is doing a pretty good job. For mixed media paper, this is working really well. And then what I can do is just go back into the middle of these and drop in some more colour, which will also spread, but will leave, hopefully, a light ring around it. Now I'm using the same colour. I'm doing it very monochromatically, or no, I'm using indigo and this purple. But it does, how's this? Not really wet enough, so I'm going to have to go back to this one and add another layer just to wet this back up. So I can do the same thing on here. And it is magic. Just watching this happen is rather wonderful as far as I'm concerned. It's taken me a long time to get used to using the idea of using a bigger brush to fill bigger areas in, because I will fuss around with tiny brushes. And I don't want to fuss around with watercolour here. What I do want is quite saturated colours, but I just want to drop the colour in. Now I've got the area nice and damp. and just let it do its thing. So at the bottom here, I'm just adding some dots of the indigo, which will spread out because that area is quite dark. Now, I don't know if you'll see, hopefully you can see, if I try and get this under some light, and it's probably not, but you'll see it more when it dries, that I've got purple centres and white outer rims. Try this. How does this work? I don't know. Oh, that's a bit better. You can see that now, can't you? What's that doing? That's all right. The saturation might help if that gap goes down a little bit. Is it? Sorry, I'm fiddling with this. That's about the best I can do, I think. So my brush is now just got water in it, and I'm doing the same thing where I'm adding spots of water here so it can spread out. And you get all these lovely blooming patterns, and they will never run into each other because they push some of the paint away from themselves. And that makes something that is really, really, it makes this beautiful texture. I'm sorry, I can't see it too well on my screen. Yes, the indigo will. The indigo, all the watercolor paints will lighten up as they dry. Look at this one, how much lighter it is now, and it's not completely dry yet. When it's wet, there's more light being able to be reflected from it because it's basically a shiny surface. Um, Physics going on here, science. But when it's dry, the surface is quite matte, so not as much colour is reflected from it. Um, and also, you know, the colour sinks into the paper as well, so there's not so much on the top. And it's the top layers that reflect, that the light reflects so we can see the colour. So you can already see how much lighter this is than this one. Um, I with me, I tend to use perhaps a bit more watercolour than I think I do, so I get these intense colours. You can build it up in thinner layers, you can use just light washes. It's entirely what you want, but these, when they're dry, will actually look really quite nice, and they will really help, the oh, let me just see if I can clean that. Nope, once it's stuck to this paper, it doesn't lift, unlike watercolor paper. Um, oh, no, I've got some of that bleeding, so I'll make it worse for my fiddling. Um, but I want that because I want the white lighter areas. Oh gosh, I've got paint, watery paint spots everywhere. I want the drawing that I've done to stand out, and I want it like there's areas looking through to a night sky in this case. You can see how light this has become. This will dry to be as light, maybe not quite as light, but it will dry. Let me just add a little bit more water in the middle of these and see if they'll spread anymore. There's all sorts of things you can do to get texture on watercolor. If I added yellow ochre to indigo, it would make green, and green and yellow and purple. So an ochre, browny, yellowy colour with purple would make baby poop. A tiny little bit would help, but I want that intensity. I want that contrast, and it's going to mean that I'm going to have to be really, really careful how. Go on, let's dry you up. I'm going to have to be very, very careful how and where I add patterns and what kinds of patterns and textures I add, because I want to keep most of my drawing black and white, just have this color as a background. So I'll do one more section. Yeah, you can see it when it dries, you'll see it better because we haven't got glare from the lighting, and you will see what's underneath so much better than you can now. It just takes a wee while to dry, especially as I've added quite a lot of liquid to these. Okay, so time for another section. Let's go here. Yeah, this has got starting off with indigo. It doesn't matter because I'm mixing the two colours, and each section will be different. There's no way I can make them exactly the same. And actually, nor do I wish to. Right, so here goes some purpley blue in. As you put it, I don't know if you can, sorry, I don't know if you can see or how it spreads into the wet areas. You get this lovely, almost like webbing, or it's like the roots of fungi, the mycelial roots that spread out, or tree roots. And it just spreads in its own sweet way. And I love it. I'm waiting, I'm just moving it around a little bit, trying to get more colour in. To do that, I'm just dotting my brush into it and letting the paint come off my brush and in there. Again, I'm just going to add some darker paint. I feel I might add some white dots on the top of this when it's all dry, because I feel it looks a bit more like a night sky than anything else. And of course, I've got these lovely sections where it looks like we've got glowing going on. But I could just create, sort of like stripes in it if I wanted to, with dots of water or other colours. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to mix that all in because I really do want these starry like structures. Just do that and add some more colour. It's going to take a while to dry now before I can do anything else with it. It's me mucking about with things. I quite like that I've separated this section into slightly small, well, one small and one a little bit bigger sizes, because I to fill all of that in and keep it moist so I can work with the watercolors. It'd be awkward. If I was working on watercolor paper, especially all cotton, I'd have a lot more working time. But I'd also have to be a lot more patient about letting things dry and watching out for when they're at that point. I'm amazed with the amount of working I'm doing on this paper with the brush that it's not pilling up, which is an absolute, well, amazement to me. It really is. So here I'm just adding more colour. And yeah, it is quite dark, but you can see how it lightens as it dries as well. Leave that for a moment. How's this doing? Still a bit too wet for me to do anything with. A bit more water so I can plenty up on this brush. These are very thirsty brushes, these ones, and they really do hold a lot of water or paint, which makes it easy to fill an area in with just filling one brush. I mean, depending on the size of the brush and the size of the area. I like this size of the brush. It's a size 2. They've all got very fine points. I'm not sure what sizes I've got, whether it's 2, 6 and 10 or 2, 6 and 8 or something. Um, but this seems to be about the right size for this kind of area to fill in. So now I can go back with more colour, knowing that I won't have to work so hard to get a gradient going, perhaps, or to add extra colour to this. I love that. I keep saying this, but I really do love the magic of the, paint blossoming, blooming in the wet areas of the paper. I mean, I'm adding so much now that I'm getting quite a nice overall, very similar kind of, um, colour, but I'm still going to go back here and add extra colour in at the underneath here to get to bring some shadows in. Yes, it will spread out, but needs a bit there. I can see where it's a bit lonely. I'm hoping I haven't left this alone too long here. No, perfect. So I'm just dropping plain water in and just letting it do its thing, whatever its thing is, to create these little sections. I don't think any of the watercolours I've got here are granulating. Um, Granulation is a kind of texture that's produced by granulating watercolours. Kuretake, the Gansai Tambi watercolours. I've got the Art Nouveau set, which I love the colours of. They've brought out a set of granulating Gansai Tambis, but I haven't been able to find it yet. Mind you, I haven't looked for a couple of weeks, but I would like to because I love texture. Now, instead of using water, you could use isopropyl alcohol, IPA, rubbing alcohol as it's called in places as well. Um, you could try dropping salt on it, which causes different textures and patterns. Um, there's all kinds of things you can do. Sort of like scrunching up cling film on top of it to create various wrinkles and things in. Adding Indian inks creates a different kind of texture. Adding it's up to, all kinds of things you can do. Once the watercolor's dry, I can add another layer of watercolor if I wish, or I can use colored pencils or ink tents to add more color, um, or, anything really that you can think of. And it really is fantastic and it really is quite magic. Now, this is drying quite nicely, although I have made some gaffes here and there. But what I'll do is I'll use those to help me put some texture in to disguise them, like they're supposed to be. They're almost like they're the shadows. I'm just going to pop my paintbrushes away. I didn't use the finer one, I only used that lovely big one. That's becoming my go-to brush for everything. Let me just close this up and move those out the way. Just going to reach down beside me and excuse the noise, but I'm just going to use a heat tool to dry these quicker. It's like a supercharged hairdryer, but you wouldn't want to dry your hair with this because it blows out incredibly hot air. But you can see how this, as it dries now, has become a lot paler. And it's not because of the heat, it's just that I am evaporating the water off. I am going to go underneath because drying from behind can help. And these areas will not be ready for me to work on. They're going to be too wet for quite a while because the paper has got quite saturated. And my paper's wrinkling with this, but it's fine. You just zoom out. There you are. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. I'll give this a chance just to cool down because it's got rather hot. We put that out the way before I throw it over myself. But that's where I am. That's the only section I didn't do here. But I can already see how the parts of my design that I want to be forward rather than in the background are coming forward. There's a lot here, so I may add some more strands of these here just to fill in some of that space so that or perhaps some more of this filling in. You've actually got quite cute filling this in, or some other bits just to add continuity. And if I can find my pen, there it is, as if I haven't got any pens round here. I kid you not. I'm sure my house is sort of like a museum to pens. I'm sure I'll find a box somewhere of pens I've never owned, but they've sort of found their way to me to end their days as a pen. Um, but I feel that round here I could almost perhaps fill it in with these teardrop shaped leaves. I said I'm sure it's a Zentangle pattern, or it's a pattern that's used in Zentangle and it has a name, but I couldn't tell you what it is, which is fine. But I think it'll be a nice way to fill some of these sections in before I add that background purple, just to bring some interest in. This bin will be going to pen heaven before much longer, also known as the bin, because the nib is becoming increasingly difficult for me to work with. And that's what frustrates me about fine liner pens is they're great, they're convenient. They don't, it's not like a rotary pen, a technical pen, or a fountain pen. You're not going to get ink splurging out of the nib, as they can do with the others. But I've never used one until it's empty of ink yet. I always destroy the nibs long before I've used all the ink. So I could have drawn this pattern on top of purple, but I don't want to because I just want to repeat these patterns like this. That's a very funny shaped leaf. I don't care, it's squashed in. It's a squished one. That feels the right thing to do on this side here. And I'll find a third area because I like thirds or odd numbers of things. Our eyes can, or our brains try to make sense of patterns and things that are in numbers. And it particularly likes odd numbers because they don't, or they either make a very clear pattern or they make no pattern at all. Whereas if you've got even numbers, your brain's trying to divide them into twos and twos, or however there are. And there's so many options, it's just not comfortable, I guess. That's how I think about it. I could be wrong in my interpretation, but odd numbers are definitely more pleasing to our brain than even numbers of objects. One is an odd number, and yet if you want a centerpiece, it's one thing, isn't it? In a garden, it'd be one tree or one glorious plant, or perhaps a border of just one plant that stands out amongst all the others, or a statue that draws your eye to that. I don't know. It is 10 o'clock. Oh no, it's 20 past 10 now in the UK. It is dark outside, the sun has set. For some reason, the song "The Sun Has Got His Hat On" has just run through my head. For some reason, the song "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead" is running through my head this evening. Yeah, got no idea what that's about, or if I do, I'm not going to tell you. Let you decide what's going on in my brain. And of course, you'll all be wrong, because I'm not entirely sure either. Just one of those things. That actually looks quite nice around this. Hmm. I mean, this is going to give me hours of more work if I decide to finish it. It's my problem with things in sketchbooks, they don't always get finished. They get done to a point of, yeah, I know where I'm going with this yet, or I don't know what to do next, so I'll leave it until I'm ready to, and I may never get to it. But I always say, they've all served their purpose in one way or another. Sometimes it might be to help me de-stress, to get rid of nervous energy or anything else, to help me settle emotions down, or just to have some meditative time where I can lose myself in this with some gentle music on that I like, or sometimes an audiobook. I do like an audiobook as well when I'm working on art. I've been listening to The Shepherd's Crown by Terry Pratchett, which is the last of his Discworld books before he passed away. And it was written quite a few years ago. I've had it in my Kindle for a long time, and I've just not been able to bring myself to read it because it's full of my favourite characters. The story is about one of my favourite characters, a young witch called Tiffany Aching, and I've had tears as characters have died, and you know, and I know it's the end of something. It's never really the end, as in I can always reread all the books if I wish to, but it's the end of an era, I suppose, is that there'll be no more after this, and I want to know what happens to those characters I love and seem to know so well, and it's not going to happen, sadly. Well, not by Terry Pratchett. I don't know if somebody else will take it up, but his mind, his imagination was amazing. And although sometimes I just don't get things, I mean, one of the witches in the books is called Nanny Og, and I didn't get it, because every name has got a pen in it. I still haven't got some of them, but it's only by reading this book. And they said, oh, her house is called Tir Nanny Og. I went, oh, Tir Nanog, which is sort of like the realm of, I think it's the realm of fairies in Gaelic, in Irish mythology. I think Tir Nanog is a magical land, or I thought, oh, how stupid am I that I didn't get Nanog? Yeah, I'm not. I'm known for not always getting puns or jokes easily. I can take things very literally, and if it's not a very obvious hint, then I can be really stuck on it. So I felt, how daft am I? Because I know I've heard of Tir na Nog, even though I can't bring to my mind what it is exactly. I know it's linked to mythology and it's linked to, magical realms of fairy and, magic and no doubt witches and so on. But it just never occurred to me to put Nanny Og with Tir na Nog. Yep. So that was a face palm moment today. Duh, duh. How dull am I? That actually has worked quite nicely. It's almost like a background in itself. Okay, let's put another couple of my nerve connections in, because, it's nice to have a few more sections that will, not all of these will have background in them, the purple background. Some will, but not all. We shall see. Well, I shall see in the fullness of time what happens. So we've got that. This is a big area here, so what, adjust the camera, Zaghetti or Flux? Janice, thank you. Oh, right, yes, like I did in the one with green, Trevor, where I used green and then some areas that were yellow. I could possibly do that, but I'm not so sure I like that as much. I'll see what happens. Um, I'm guessing you want me to zoom in. Is that better, Miss Betsy? We go. And then this needs something here. And I think it may just be that I'll put one around here. This is going to be interesting. Oh, I've got complicated. I've added 3 of these coming off, and that actually is quite fun. But I do want this one to go behind there, as if it's going through and under. And I can actually do something similar here just to finish that section off. So I'm very clumsily now just thickening these lines just to give me that. I really need to get some '07 fine liners, I think. So much easier to use those to do this, but this pen is getting there all on its sweet own. That was fun. And I think that this may be a bit of fun as well, where I'm just going to have perhaps some nexuses or nexi, where we've got some branching off going. These gaps are good because it means I can join things together. Oh, yeah. Well, who'd have thought it, eh? And that is instantly adding more complexity into this than I thought I would have. And then I've got this one here. I don't know what's going to happen with this. Uh, oops, it's going to be a seriously thick one. If they're nerves, they all need their myelin sheath, which is a fatty layer which keeps the electrical signals in the nerves, stops them from leaking out everywhere so that the signals from your brain to your nerves and back to your brain and so on aren't lost. And that's the reason why we can't have a no-fat diet. One of the reasons, fat is important in diet for a number of reasons, and the right kinds of fat as well. So keeping that fatty sheath on your nerves is very important, otherwise they misfire, or that the signals don't get to to the parts of the body that you need them, and that can wreak havoc in so many ways. So there you are, public health announcement now as well. Honestly, can't get away from it with me. Keep saying you can take the scientist out of the lab, but you can't take the science. Or you can take the girl out of the lab, but you can't take the science out of the girl. Or you could take the girl and put her in an art studio, or the scientist in an art studio. You can't take the science out of her. I'm making a silly analogies here. There we go. Ooh, right, tidy that up. So that's really split this up into a lot of smaller areas. And I quite like how that is appearing at the moment. It's rather cool. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time. I didn't want to, I just realized I did not want to fill that one in. I've done it now. I've done it now. Okay, let's switch to a finer pen. I'm going all the way down to an O1 here because I do want to create some textures and patterns. Can I go in any closer? Oh, I can. How good's that? There we are. So I'm going to use one of my favourite patterns for creating the illusion of space around this. I'm drawing very fine lines, but I'm leaving a little gap around here. And those fine lines coming up to that point, I've messed that up there, but I'm going to do what I can to recover. I'm not going to let it upset me. These corners are tricksy. I should have started at the corners first. These lines are beginning to bend as well, which will give the feeling of um, dimension of things rising up or dropping down. There we go. That's as good as I'm going to get. It's not perfect, but it's fine. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing here, but I'm going to learn from my error or my first go, and I'm going to start with the corners and work out until I've got a nice angle to work on to go around. I'm going to do that with all of the corners first. So that I know that I'm going to be able to work along this relatively straight stretch with all of these parallel to one another, more or less. We're drawing them by hand. And if the thickness gets narrower and thinner of this blank area, just go with it. It adds interest. We are human, not machines. I know there are artists who do amazing drawings and art that are almost like photos, photorealistic art, very real. And I admire them for their skill, for their talent, for their patience. I must admit, I like to see art that's really, really nice. Don't get me wrong, I do like digital art and various kinds of illustrations and so on. But I also like to see art where you can see the the signature of the human that's made it. And I don't mean the written signature, the way they use their pen, the way that pen lines can be a bit wibbly wobbly or imperfect. If they're using watercolor, painting with watercolor first and drawing with ink afterwards, or vice versa, the watercolor doesn't exactly fill the pen shape, that it flows outside. Um, Things like that, they fascinate me because I can be so focused on getting everything perfect, perfect, perfect. I forget that how much I love things that aren't. And again, it's having that bravery. Now, this is kind of a hole in this one, so I am going to add some cross hatching like that to really darken that, to give it that feeling of a hole. This outside one, I could put some lines around it, but I'm going to leave it for now because I really don't know what I want to do there. Again, here I'm going to fill this in with lines like so, and I'm going to do some of these lines here as well around it. And I'm also going to leave that outside edge for now because I'm not sure what I want to do. I think I might want to do something a little different there. Maybe I'll just leave it with some graphite shading. That could be quite nice, so that I have that space between the fussiness and the the number of lines, or, the texture there, and something that's really nice and simple. It's a nice contrast, and it helps to separate that, fussy or intricate or, you know, finely textured section from other finely textured sections that we'll have. So for now, that looks not so bad. These ones could be interesting. What I'm going to do in this one is my new favourite textural pattern, and I'm literally just taking a line for a walk, and I'm using wibbly wobbly line shapes. If my line finishes, I'll just start again from the sides and just keep on going. Not overlapping it, I'm just filling the space in, folding the line with my pen as I go. But I'm trying to get these lines to touch the edge, so that, like there, I've got a gap there, so I'll just go back and add a little bit of ink. But it's just a different way of adding texture. I think somebody said it's a bit like damask steel or Damascus steel. Pattern welded steel is another way of describing it. And this is steel that is made by taking a piece of iron, heating it up, hammering it thin, folding it, and then heating it, hammering to weld it together, folding it after heating again. And you repeat this, and you have to get everything exactly right. Otherwise, instead of having strong steel at the end, you end up with something very weak and it's brittle and it just shatters. And you could have wasted hours and hours of really hard and hot work, um, creating that damask steel for it to be worthless. And although the art hasn't been lost, the pattern welding that the Anglo-Saxons did, nobody knows how they achieved what they did, because it's equivalent to, if not better than, some modern ways of making damask steel and so on. The techniques they used have been long lost. They didn't really write very much, or whatever they did write hasn't, survived or remained. And perhaps with things like crafts, they didn't write it down at all, or, different technologies. Perhaps it was so commonly known, they never thought that people wouldn't know it. It's quite magical. So there, what I did was I went back around the bottom and the top edge and added some of the pattern, but just in a smaller band. And I'm actually going to go back and do the same a third time, just to darken this again. I'm using the density of ink to produce darker and lighter areas instead of using graphite, if you like. So the more ink there is, the darker it appears. And so that's really brought that out with the highlights. And it's just a matter of practicing. Do you know what, Janice? I love David Tennant. Him and Michael Sheen are perhaps my two favourite actors of this time, apart from Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi and some other Star Wars characters. But that's a whole different story. But I've not seen much of his Doctor Who version. I remember Doctor Who as a child, but I've never seen any of the new modern versions, um, which I ought to really, because they're all available, I think, on BBC iPlayer. But yeah, and of course it's a big anniversary, isn't it, this year? Is it 60 years? Doctor Who, 60th anniversary of its first one, I think. Possibly. No, it wouldn't have been, because I think it started before I was born. But either way, perhaps I'm confusing that with something else. I'm very easily confused about many things. But yeah, that just takes a little bit of practice. Try it on a wider section first, but a fine, fine pen. Otherwise, the lines will be so thick, you'll end up with just black. I've got a 0.1, but I know somewhere I've got 0.05s, I think it is. Have I got a 0.005? I hope not, because that'd be ridiculous. I don't want the same pattern here as I have, in the three sections. I want something a bit different. And I'm going to take this idea of lines, but instead of having them not meet the top and bottom egg or one of the edges, I'm just going to sort of split them somewhere in the middle and put one or a couple of dots in just to add a highlight, slightly less ink, just helping me to leave a gap. I'm not trying to line the dots or anything up. I don't want it a very even highlight. I don't want somebody to think it's like, polished shiny metal. But it's just perhaps satiny enough to reflect some light. If I had a more flexible nib or one that I'm not afraid of breaking, I'd actually make the beginning and end of the lines that little bit thicker. So there's more ink at the edges to darken where these join. Now, they're not necessarily all going to be exactly following the contour of the one previously, but I'm not really too bothered about that, to be honest. Again, it's that imperfect nature that makes it interesting. But from a distance, nobody will really notice that the variations and the slight imperfections. So I've done that. Can I get in any closer? This is the question. Nope, that's as close as it goes, I'm sorry. Without moving my camera, and I don't want to do that because I will get seasick just as much as you will. So perhaps, and you know, when I'm not showing you a whole sketchbook, I will start with my camera lower so that I can really zoom in. Still see the whole page, but zoom in. So I'm going to do this section in the same way, but for variety, I'm going to work in the opposite direction. Instead of from the bottom to the top here, I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. I like to do that because it stops me from going into automatic mode and forgetting what I really wanted to do if I've got any ideas of what I want to do. I know that I'm going to fill this section in with this same pattern, but if I get lost in a fug or, I'm off to La La Fairyland, then I could end up doing something really silly and regret that I went into La La Fairyland. There we go. So there's that done. So those patterns have just added some texture there. But I am going to use the trusty 4B pencil. I'm just going to give it a quick sharpen. I've got a graphite one there. There we are. And I'm going to add some shading here so we can see how that will look. Not around the centre of this, but round the edges, and particularly the bottom edge, which is where I think the shadow would be greatest. Not moving too much of the graphite, but just keeping it there. And you can see that is already making it feel that this is a bit further away. It's not as intense as I like, so what you do is just go back and add a bit more graphite. And you can keep doing that until you're satisfied with what you have there. And that's quite a bit better now. Just a bit more. That I'll just work in where I want it the darkest. And then I'll do the same around this area's edge. It's like so. And then Wishing I had a sharper pointed tortillon. Then that's what erasers are for, if I get too much area filled with shadow. Just want to ease this around and to give me that feeling of shading, particularly at the bottom here, because that's where the thickest lines are. And I'm going to do the same with this section that has nothing on it. No lines or anything, it's just pure paper. Now I'm going to have to use my eraser, I think, to put highlights back in. Which is fine, I can do that. That's what they're invented for. Ew. Now I've gone and stuck it in its container so hard I can't get it out. We'll do that now. Perhaps I don't need much shading at the top of it. Does that work? Yeah, that works. It looks like we've got these things on it, like a platform, you know, like this bottom bit is a platform. So I can do that with the other sections, and I'll do the same kind of thing there. I won't do it now. This one, I do want to add shading tops and bottoms of this line and here, tops and bottoms of this border or this area, and to the side where it overlaps. Same here. So I just want to get some extra shading in, just to help with that feeling of dimension again. Because if I use it little enough, the pen lines will actually show through. So the texture is still there. The graphite is quite shiny, having said that, which you can see there. But if I move it so it doesn't have the light on it, perhaps as much, perhaps you can see that the pattern still shows through. So it is really shiny. Should have used a matte graphite pencil, but hey ho. For others, for these, I'm just going to add some graphite at the base of each one, where they would be shady as they appear out from under each other. So if I can just do that. I'll only do a few for now. Like so. Oops, sorry. It's off camera. But I've just added some graphite to these, just at the bases, like so. On either side, just a little bit, and then just spreading it out so I've got shadow at the bottom of these leafy areas. Mostly working into the same space, but just blending a little bit of grey out, just to help so we don't have a harsh line. I say we, that's me and my tortillon, giving it instructions as to what to do. I don't think it listens to me very much, but you know, I can always hope. Somebody brings me to my senses. So there, that it's subtle, but you can see the difference. Once it's all done, it will make quite a nice difference. To these, well, these areas around and about, I have got ideas about this. I do. Just tidy this up here a moment. Because these are the same kinds of shapes as we've got here. So I'm going to do the same thing in these and add shading in the same kind of way. But in these sections, some of them I'll want to look like perhaps that they've got an opening to the, no, I don't want that size. I want my 03. So I'll have my 03 here. I think some of these I might like to have them as if they're almost like little windows, perhaps. So I'm going to do something here where I am drawing a border inside, and then I will draw a fine border inside that as well. And then I'm going to join corners to corners on the outside level, or where, around it. It doesn't have to be in the corners exactly. Just where you feel that there's a connection needs to be made. Then the inside, I can watercolor completely in the background. And that, I think, could make an interesting kind of idea. I think in Zentangle they call this coffering, after coffered ceilings. But it's like the mouldings that you have around the edge of ceilings in some houses. I've got some in my downstairs room. It's not posh, by the way, my house, far from it. It's homely. So I've got that. Yeah, and I'm just adding some extra lines in because I just feel that these longer areas just need that extra bit of support, or things. I do fancy then having these in this dark purple, but perhaps with some white or gold stars inside. Gold would be rather stunning. Am I brave enough to do it, though? That's the question. It's getting hard to work out which line is which is a good sign that I need to go and have something to drink and then wend my way to my bed. Oh gosh, it's nearly 11 o'clock at night. Oh, thanks, Janice. I will have a look at it sometime. I forget about television. I watch lots of things, but I forget to look at other things. So if I just move out, this is nowhere near finished. Far from it. I've got that in the way. But it's on its way, and you can see how I'm likely to finish and complete it. I'm not entirely sure exactly how I'm going to do this, but I will. I'm not sure whether I'm going to, well, I will have to finish every one of these off now like that, which is going to irritate me if I don't like it when I when I wake up in the morning. If it really irritates me, it's going to go black. These sections will just be filled with black and be done with it. But I doubt that'll happen though. So I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been a long stream. Thanks, Miss Betsy. I'm glad you like it. It's been a long stream. It's 2.5 hours, over 2.5 hours long. I've enjoyed myself. I'm so glad that my camera mostly works. That is the lighting I've got to sort out now. So that will be a search on the Amazon again for something for lighting that will suit you. And I'm sure I will get something, or a stand for the light I've got, because no doubt if I pick this up and hold it, let me have a look. I've got a ring light here. If I hold it sort of like here, round there. Does that make a difference? Is that better? I don't know, 'cause all I can see is the reflection. That would work, but see, ring lights. That would work there, but I've got no way of attaching it there. I will work it because they're not expensive really. Well, it's tax deductible when it comes down to it. So, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you'll have a go drawing it yourself if you haven't already. And I'm glad. Thank you everybody who's joined me and left lovely comments um, and requests and so on. Please feel free to suggest things you'd like to see. It may be perhaps I'll use Trevor's idea of using different colours in these sections because that would make sense then, wouldn't it? And perhaps filling these areas here with that purple colour just to keep it. Yeah, I'll see. That could be interesting. Zaghetti flats. I don't know what Zaghetti is, but whatever this one is, I it's a favourite kind of drawing of mine. I've used that pattern in drawings since before I discovered Zentangle. And so, as it happens, because nothing is truly, well, there are original patterns, but when you look at them, you can see where the inspirations come from other places. And some kinds of patterns go back to prehistory. The earliest art involves, the same kinds of symbols are found worldwide in the earliest humans. Spirals and egg shapes and circles and crosses, things like that. And there are a few others, I can't remember what the others are, but and sort of snaky shapes and things like that. And they're across all humanity at those prehistoric times, and they still occur in artwork and pattern and design across the world now, perhaps put together in slightly different ways using different color palettes for different purposes. But those shapes resonate inside our heads. I mean, spirals are one of my favorite things to draw, and I have got spirals, the nose and this funny bit at the front there. They're the only spirals in the whole of this drawing, and I love spirals, but it works. So thank you so much. Please look after yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day, or if, like me, you're heading to bed, have a good night's sleep, and I'll see you again sometime soon. It'll be impromptu, possibly. Perhaps I'll plan myself more. But if I do one tomorrow, it's likely to be in the day rather than in the evening UK time, because I know I've got something to do tomorrow evening. So until then, take care, look after yourselves, and thank you so much for joining me. Night, night now. Bye.